Hi guys, it's Sam for Digital Meat, and today's tutorial is going to be about unwrapping, UV unwrapping in Cinema 4D. I'm going to go over a little bit about the texture tag, very brief, so I suppose we better get stuck in. I've created a material here and put a texture in the color channel. That texture can be grabbed here. And that's on this website, Hello Lux. It's ran by a guy called Tim Clapham. It's a pretty good site, so I'd say go check that out. It's very useful. But that's where I got this sort of UV chart from. I'll put the link under the video. Okay, so I've just put that in the color channel of a material. I'm just going to create a box. And let's change my display so you can see the lines, and let's just drag this material onto our box. Now you'll notice up here when I do, you can drag it onto the box or the object in the object manager. You'll see that once I drop it on there, we get this texture tag. So we get the texture on the object and we get this tag here. Just to point out, if your texture is looking a little bit blurry in the viewport, you can actually open up your material. Go down to the editor and you can choose, like when it's on default texture size, which is what I gather you'll be getting, it will look like this, but at render it will look fine. If you want a little bit more detail in your viewport, you can just roll down this, and I'm choosing 1024 by 1024 because I know that's how big the texture is. So anything over that and it won't actually do anything, it won't look any better. So okay. So we've got this on our object. Now we can see how it's being projected onto the box. You'll notice that the cube itself doesn't actually have a UV tag, and that's because this cube is not edible yet. So if we clicked on this, we'd generate UVs and create a UV tag here. But while the cube is still a primitive object, the UVs are being generated by Cinema 4D internally. Okay, so if we click on this, we've got the projection UV mapping, and it hasn't actually got any UVs yet as such. They're, like I said, being done internally. We've got spherical mapping. You can see what that does here. Cylindrical. See, there's no cap on the top or bottom. I'm going to take you back to cube for a minute. If we click on this texture tag here, we can actually see what's happening. So you can see it's been projected on 6 sides, so every side looks the same. If we change this to cylindrical, we can see how that mapping's working there. And then we get frontal, which is kind of like it's projecting the texture from the viewer's view. So it's acting like a sort of projection. And we've got flat as well, so, you know, it's a flat projection here. Okay, so let's put this back to cubic, and we'll go back to model mode. So actually, if we go back to this and I choose this, I can drag this about as well. So you can see where the edge of the texture is there. I'll just go back here, and it sort of loops around on itself. You can actually turn that on and off in the texture tag. You've got this tile button here, so if you don't tile it, you can see that it doesn't tile. So I'm just going to go back a few steps. Let's go back to cubic. So you can actually sort of texture a primitive like that, really, but that's not really helping us if we want to actually unwrap our object. So if I make this an editable object and we look up here, you'll see that it assigns it UVs. We've got a UV map now, and the cube is editable. And if we go to the texture tag, it's still actually on cubic. Let's change it to UVs and go up to our layout and go to BPUV edit. Now we can actually load our texture. Open texture. it was this. There we go. So we can see our textures in our UV editor there. Right, now if we look up here, we have UV polygons, UV points, and texture mode. That texture mode is the same icon we ticked over here when we was in the other view. And these are, if I just switch back to here, you can see we've got so object mode, the texture, and then we've got points, edges, and polygons. That's exactly what's in here. So object mode, polygons, edges, and points. And these are UV points and UV polygons, so it's important that we don't get those mixed up. Anyway, so let's display our UV mesh. If it's not displayed in this window here, this sort of darkened area is the area of where our texture is going to lie. And like you saw a minute ago, I loaded our texture in there, and that's where it is. So let's display the UV mesh. Okay, so if I just turn off the texture, actually, you can see that black outline is actually our UV mesh. But they're overlapping. So if I actually go to a UV polygon and select one, and go to the move tool, I can move this one out the way, and you can see, if I just sort of put it on this corner in the center there, you can see that where it's tiling, it's all sort of meeting up here, and you can actually visualize this in here. I think view, tile UV, tile V, show tile texture. There we go. So you can tile it up and down, and whatever is being displayed under this UV polygon here is what is being displayed here in our 3D view. And if I scale this polygon so it was only displaying this small section, need my move tool, this small section that has 4 and 7 in it, that's all that will be displayed in there. So okay, unwrapping. Let's go to our rectangular mode. Actually, we probably don't need to do that. We can just Control A here. That'll select all our UV polys. And let's turn this texture off so it's easier to see for a moment. Okay, so that's all our UV polys. Projection. If we go to the projection tag, we've got flat. So this is a lot like what we were doing before in the actual material tag itself. We've got frontal. So that kind of locks it in like the texture is being projected out from our view, and you can see that that's what it looks like in our UV port. Cylindrical, that's how it's... The reason there's no texture on the top and bottom is because that is actually our top there, here. So if we just selected that polygon and then went to flat, there you go, box, it would sort of stretch it out a little bit. Anyway, so if we wanted to unwrap this shape in itself is quite simple, really, because all we'd have to do here really is go to projection and choose one of the, because it's a cube, it's safe to say we could choose cubic. Now, this is what we had before. All of the polygons here are overlapped, so they're sitting one on top of each other. So we Control A, select them all again, and pick cubic 2. It unfolds it out in this kind of cross shape, and you can see that if we turn our texture on again, where it's sitting there is what's being displayed in this. If we grabbed it and made it bigger, you can see how that's working. So that's all very well and good for a shape like a box. Let's take this texture off again. So yeah, a shape like a box, we can pick cubic 2, unfold it, and the reason we'd want a shape like this is because if you wanted to paint each side differently, say in substance paint or something like that, well then you'd have to have no overlapping polygons. So in this case, it'd be really easy to we'd be starting off with something like this. You'd select all your polys and then select cubic 2 or box. I think it does the same thing, and it'd unwrap it with no overlapping edges. So what would happen if we had a bit more of a complex shape? So let's go back to this. Let's get rid of our tag for now, and I'm going to go into poly mode, select all my polys, right click, and I'm going to inner extrude. Okay, so we've got that there. I'll just drag to the left there, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to extrude and then do it backwards. Oh, we went a little bit too far there. So okay, what about now? We've got a shape like this. If we go back into our BPUV edit, and select all of my UV polys, and let's get back to where we were. So this would be your flat projection that you normally start out with, and you'd go to do box or cubic, be pretty much the same thing. And you know, you might think, oh yeah, that's absolutely fine, but it's not. We've got some overlapping polys, and like I said, if you're gonna if you want to paint this by hand in, say, Substance Paint or even body paint inside Cinema 4D, or if you were creating a UV for a light map, say in Unity or something like that, you wouldn't want overlapping polygons. So this may look all well and good, but it isn't, because if we zoom into our scene here and pick this, that's our poly there. If we pick this, right, okay, so this is our polygon here. But as you can see, there's another polygon right here. Let's just make that a bit smaller. That's overlapping it. They're sharing the same space, these two things on the UV map. So they'll basically be getting exactly the same, whatever texture's underneath, these two will be displaying the same bit of it. So to demonstrate, actually, if I take this material and where is my materials? Let's get back here, reapply it to the box. You can actually see that this bit has got 1, 2, and exactly the same thing's being showed up there because they're occupying the same space of the UV map. Now, we don't want that. We don't want overlapping polys. And obviously, we couldn't get that result from doing what we did with the simple box by selecting all of our UV polys and hitting cubic 2. We got overlapping polys. No good. So what we'd have to do is we'd have to unwrap this object. So let's go to Relax UV, this tab. Now, if I was to just relax this object now and apply it, it would break it up. We've got no overlapping polygons, which is a good thing, but they're no longer attached, which isn't great. So I'm going to, yeah, that doesn't make any difference. Good. Okay. So, you know, if you took this, if you wanted to paint your texture in Photoshop or whatever, ideally you'd want all the polygons that are actually attached together, like this one and this one. So if we just select those in our scene, so that and that, ideally in our UV map we'd want them to actually be next to each other or attached. So that obviously hasn't happened when we've relaxed like this. So we've got to pin points and we've got to make cuts so that it unfolds. So how do we go about that? Again, let's get rid of this tag so we can just deal with the geometry. I'm going to go back to the standard view for a minute and unselect all of that lot. I'm going to go into point mode. So basically what we'd probably want to do is have this bottom part of our object stuck to, you know, to stay where it is, and these sides flap down like this, kind of like we saw a minute ago with the cross that we unfolded with the simple box, that obviously isn't working for this shape. So we've got to define what points we want to have stick. So we don't want these bottom points to move. So we can choose this, this, this and this. And these two. I'm just shift selecting there. That adds to your selection. So now we've got our points selected. Okay. Now we've got to choose where our cuts are. So that's done in edge mode. Don't worry, if I click on edge mode, our point selection is still selected. If I go back to points, they're still there. So let's go to edge. Now what I want to do is cut all of my edges along here, because we want this to flap down. We want this to flap down, so we need 2 cuts either side of that. In fact, we want all of these. And across the top, we want these, but not all the way around. If we chose that 4th one here, it would separate the top. But what we actually want is this to be like a hinge. So this folds up and then this folds down with this top bit attached. So for our cuts, that's absolutely acceptable. So if we go back to the BP UV edit, what we need to do now is select all our polygons that is going to be affected. They're normal polygons, excuse me, UV polygons, there we go. And we want to determine the view that it's going to unfold from. So you'd probably be thinking, well, the points are going to be stuck to the floor, so maybe a top view. So you choose your top view, go into projection and say frontal. So it actually displays that in our UV there. Perfect. And then you'd think, go back to the relax tab and press apply. Now, obviously that didn't work, and there's a reason. If we undo, so we're back to this view. If you're looking from this object from the top, where we pinned our points is actually on the bottom of this object, and if you're looking in from the top at the points that we've you know, if you imagine this top wasn't there and you're looking down, you're actually looking at the sort of reverse normal of the bottom of this, which is no good. So what we've actually got to do is look up from the bottom. So if we go to our top view and go to camera and say bottom, and then go back into our UV window projection and say frontal, now this is being projected from the bottom looking up, which is what we want. Then we can go back to relax UV. This pinpoint selection, that point selection we made earlier, these, we can go back into this view actually. This is what it's using. It's saying pin these points, stick them. And then in this bit down here, it's saying cut selected edges, and that's our edge selection that we made earlier. So that's actually all correct. So if we go back to this, remember we're looking up from the bottom. We can now say by default this drop down here is actually just a different type of algorithm that's being used to unfold the mesh. So we've got LSCM and ABF. By default it's on LSCM. So if we hit apply and have a look, that's the result you're going to get. We have got no overlapping polys, but we're getting some stretching. So really these options are just sort of trial and error. So let's Control Z and choose the other one. And there we get a much more cleaner result there. And obviously we'd like this to fill more of our UV map, because we've got all this space that's being wasted, unless obviously you're going to put other objects in here. But in this case we're not. So if we go to UV commands and select all our, I think we've got max UV. Oh, no, it's not that one. Excuse me. UV polys. Well, actually, you can do it manually just by I need to select my UV polys, that'd help. I had my actual modelling polys selected there, but you want this one, which is UV polys. So we've got fit UV to canvas. That's not very good because it's actually stretched out. And what we do need to max UVs, no, it's not that. Here we go, boundary to quad, no, boundary to circle. So those aren't actually very helpful in this case, but what I would do is select my and scale it up, then go back to my move tool, center it out, and then it's taken up much more of the UV space now. So if we go back to this view, you can see that if I select this in my UV map, it's selecting that, and if I select the one next to it, it's actually the one next to it here, and there's no overlapping. So this means that you can paint straight onto it with no overlapping, or even bake a light map to this and it'll be correct. So if we go back to our standard view, whack our material on, you'll see that we're getting some slight distortion here. So if we go back to our BP UV edit, actually select this, okay, and actually get our texture up. What I'm going to do is, I think what I'm going to do is select all my UV polys, and I'm going to size this up so usually a lot more of this is, see, I'm bleeding over the edge of this, but it's actually just tiling round. Now obviously if you weren't going to create a map for every side of this, you wouldn't want to do that. You'd want it to remain inside the polys there. So let's select this polygon for instance and see what we can do to straighten that out a bit. I'm going to actually select a UV point. Deary me, and select it. Actually do that. There we go. And I'm going to move that now. Because I've moved it that way, it's actually sort of it's skewing it, because, and you can see how that's affecting it. Now by me putting this way, you can see how that's being straightened up. So really what it probably wants to be is somewhere in this corner like this. And obviously you can see it's skewed down here as well, which is represented by this point up here. So if we grab that, you can actually straighten that up by pulling it in. So it takes some tweaking and whatnot, but you can see how that would kind of work. Now, for this, I mean, it's pretty obvious that this is skewed because of the way these polys are laid out with this texture. But if you were actually creating your own texture, this wouldn't matter too much, especially in something like Substance Painter, because you'd be painting onto your 3D object as long as the UV polys aren't overlapping. You should be okay in that case. So that's actually not something to worry about too much. So that's the basics of unwrapping a box. So hope you guys enjoyed that. Bye.